back to school. Brush up on the latest turfgrass research, presented by Syngenta. Professor Frank Rossi of Cornell University addressed a group of GCSAA members at the 2012 Education Conference and Golf Industry Show. He gave some interesting insights on reductions in fertilizer to aid in budget reduction.
I have friends here from Sweden, have had a pasture in Sweden where they've been studying for the last 15 years the application of phosphorates and its ability to impact the soil and the soil's ability to deliver the potassium that's in that soil. So they said, okay, is there a way to be more sustainable? And I just want to put out there, when I'm talking about sustainable, in simple terms, I mean, I don't want to do anything or put anything on my golf course that I don't absolutely need. So you look at this study, and what they started doing was fertilizing an area with potassium and then not fertilizing an area with potassium. And what they found was, as they were harvesting the tissue from this pasture, that there wasn't any difference in the amount of potassium they were taking out of the leaf tissue, whether they added the K or they didn't add the K. In simple terms, by fertilizing with potassium that they didn't really need, they were inhibiting the soil's ability to supply the potassium that was there. Now, the moral of the story is, for me, we've got issues with the way we soil test, and many of you, when you go anywhere near me over the last 5-10 years with the research we've been doing, I'm like a dog with a bone over this whole soil test thing, because I think they tend to overestimate how much we need and underestimate how much the soil can supply. And so consequently, what this study showed to me was that by fertilizing, we're actually limiting the soil's ability to supply the nutrients that our grasses need. And this is especially true in native soils where you're leaving the clippings, which would account for many of your rough and fairways, maybe some of your tees. We can leave out the sand-based greens. For proof of concept, we've been conducting some sort of demonstration research at the Bethpage State Park now for the better part of 12 years. 6 years ago, we stopped putting anything but nitrogen on our fairways. 6 years out on these native soils on Long Island, they are still not seeing any negative effects of not putting phosphorus or potassium. And I even contend, to a certain extent, you could bag up the soil that on a lot of our golf courses and sell it as fertilizer. 99% of you, if you've got decent water and a decent soil, even if it's a clay loam or a hard clay loam, even if it's a clay soil, you can easily eliminate many of the nutrients that you apply to that soil other than nitrogen. Now, I know that sounds sort of crazy, and you're like, well, how much money does that save? We used to get the phosphorus and potassium almost for free in a bag of fertilizer. And as the sort of economics of the commodities of fertilizer nutrients changed, now you had to pay 20 to 40% more. Really look closely, do I really need this? Or am I just doing it because I heard it in turf school 20 years ago, or there was a textbook that wrote it 8 years ago that says I need these things? Now, I'm not suggesting you make big changes on your putting surfaces, because sand-based greens can be complicated. Many of you may have issues with that. Now, the next question is, what about the nitrogen? We've also sort of looked at that and found, obviously, the soil's got some innate ability to supply nitrogen from the organic matter that's in that soil, the organic matter that you've been working to build over the last however many years that golf course is there. My bet is, which we've told you forever, well, you can't soil test for nitrogen, it leaches through, not much you can do about that, it's sort of transient, so you can't test for it. My bet is, in the next 5 to 10 years, you're going to be soil testing for nitrogen, you're going to figure out what your soils can supply, and you're going to be adjusting your nitrogen applications to account for that. And I got news for you. Farmers have been doing this for the last 20 years. They don't want to put a speck of fertilizer or input on that field that's not going to result in an increase in yield. What we're trying to do is produce a playable, wear-tolerant, functional, aesthetically pleasing surface and not feeding anybody with it. It may help you ratchet down how many nutrients you're using. So we've had a lot of success with products like UMax. We've played around with Polyon. These sort of go out on a, once a month, maybe quarter-pound event on these cool season bent pole or rye fairways, and really started to drive down our nitrogen rates on these fairways as well. My hope for you is, in the first part of my talk here, that you think really carefully about all the things you're purchasing and putting out on your property. Obviously, less nitrogen, less phosphorus makes environmental sense. But there's a whole economic aspect to this that I think if you start to consider, if you're fertilizing fairways or even into roughs, you could be looking at 50, 60 acres of turf that you can reduce your applications to and either enhance the plant's ability to get the nutrients that are there or just be more efficient with the way you supply them.